Welcome back to the Varsity Voices High School Sports Talk, where we cover the biggest stories shaping high school athletics in Illinois and beyond. We're diving into two topics that at first glance might seem unrelated, but they're actually part of the same larger conversation about competition, opportunity, and the changing landscape of high school sports. Are we witnessing the professionalization of high school sports? First, we'll discuss a growing trend across the country: student athletes reclassifying their graduation year, and in some cases, repeating 8th grade before entering high school. Is this simply families doing what's best for their child, or is it becoming another tool in the race for scholarships, recruiting attention, and ultimately NIL opportunities at the next level? Then we'll turn our attention to what we're calling the arms race in the Chicago Catholic League. Over the last few years, we've seen major facility upgrades, stadium projects, fieldhouses, and fundraising campaigns announced throughout the conference. We've seen schools hire former NFL players, former college coaches, and even bring club coaches onto their staffs. And now with transfer announcements seemingly happening every week, the competition for talent appears to be reaching a new level. Are these simply signs of healthy growth and investment, or are we witnessing a new era where programs feel pressured to keep up or risk being left behind? And with the IHSA Competitive Balance Committee expected to make recommendations in the near future, is there a sense that some schools are trying to position themselves before potential new restrictions are put in place? We've got plenty to unpack, so let's get into it. And Dan, I want you to put yourself in the way back machine. All right. And take yourself back to when you were 14 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
And in the 8th grade at Lakeview Junior High.
Go Spartans. Yeah.
Go Spartans. Yes. So knowing what you know today, would you tell your 14-year-old self back then that, hey, you might want to consider taking another year 8th grade, just to put yourself in a much better position physically, mentally, all of that, because at the end of this, there might be a rainbow for you, and it could be a fair amount of dollars. So What do you think?
Yeah, it's so funny because I can't even imagine that conversation. You know what's really odd about that? I mean, personally, is that I'm young for my class. I was the youngest guy. I was like the last guy to get my driver's license. There were guys who were juniors that were older than me, so I could have theoretically done that, but it was never a consideration. And
Sure.
yeah, kids got held back young. Right. And it was all about academics back in the day.
It wasn't be that you would get held back.
Well, but that's how people repeated grades, right? It was like, I felt like it was more for academics than for, athletics was never part of that discussion when they were young and doing that.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but knowing what you know now.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you tell yourself?
For sure. Give me another year.
Yeah, because you were young, right? You were younger. Not that, that's a determining factor, because it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, who would not want, especially if you're somebody who's athletically inclined, right? And good at, whatever particular sport it might be. If somebody were to say, you know what, if you redo 8th grade, we'll find a place for you.
I'm in. Sign me up. I loved 8th grade.
You are going to come out of 8th grade and you are going to be ready.
Yeah, it started lifting freshman year. Yeah, if you could know what you know now, especially, oh yeah, that would be exciting. Yeah, but Joe, how's it working? I mean, what are the mechanics of this? And we're talking about, kids who are repeating 8th grade to seemingly get an advantage athletically, and to give them another year. So I can't even get my head around the mechanics of how something like that would work.
Well, I think, and this seems to be bigger on the East Coast initially, but it is now spreading.
Yeah.
across the country, right? And there's different organizations setting up academies, call them academies, whatever you want to call it, for student athletes to repeat eighth grade, not within their school system where they were at, but at this academy where, they get additional education. But in addition to that, they also have, sports performance programs, weightlifting, whatever their sport might be, it's very tailored to, what they're particularly going to be playing once they get to high school. So it's, think of like an IMG academy, right? But for eighth graders, right?
And it
Yeah.
is
Isn't
done
that
with
amazing?
it's designed with athletics in mind.
It is, although from the ones that I've looked at, it seems it's something that they kind of try and push to the background a little bit, and they talk about if your kid isn't quite ready or you don't think they're quite ready for high school and you think they would benefit from another year of education physically, another year of growth physically, this might be a good option for you. So, you wonder, is it about student development or is it about competitive advantage?
Yeah, you
Right?
know that there are people out there, and a lot of them, and people with great intentions, and that are doing it to help gain an advantage, because in sports, if there's a rule to bend, it's going to be bent, right? And
Right.
and we've
Yeah.
seen that. That's as old as time, right? That's not a new phenomenon.
No.
That's if you can work the system a way, it's people are going to find a way to work it. If you are looking to buy or sell a home, contact Remax Realtor and Circle of Legends recipient Christopher Cobb. Let Chris's extensive negotiating experience work to guide you on all of your real estate buying and selling needs. Contact Christopher now to discuss the right strategy for your personalized real estate buying and selling plan. His number is 630-420-0070, or you can visit his website at christophercobb.com.
Yes. And it's not like this it's never happened before because it used to happen. There was isolated cases, I think, maybe more so than we know of, but there was something was kind of kept under the radar. There weren't academies set up to do this,
Right.
right, for
Yeah.
particular kids, but kids would figure out a way and their parents would figure out a way to give them another year in eighth grade to develop.
It seems like that since NIL became a thing in college, I know a lot of
Hmm.
sports talk show hosts and people who discussed what that meant said it was as if you took all the issues that happened under the table, and the $100 handshakes and everything else, and you just said,
Right.
we're going to put it out there, it's just going to be legal, we're going to have a foundation, a formalization of this process, and it's really essentially the same thing. But it seems like since that has happened, a lot of these things that have always been hush hush in sports, they have formalized in some certain way, and I don't want to say dared people to stop it, but have
Right.
said, this is just what we're doing, and it's perfectly fine and perfectly legal, and it's maybe I'm sure it benefits some kids. There are some kids who, if I also think back to my freshman year self, there are kids you saw that weren't ready, who were totally different
Right.
people by the time they left high school than when they came in. But it was all part of the
Hmm.
process. You kind of weeded your way through, and whether it was emotionally or academically or physically, you know, it still didn't. It doesn't seem. It just to me it has a seedy feel to it. I know it might be. It's completely above board. It just has a feel to it, and that could be. I could be showing my age for sure.
Well, I mean, you and I both know that. I mean, there were kids when you were coaching and you coaching at the freshman level, you looked at certain kids and you were like, boy, if they had one more year before they got here, by the time they're a sophomore or junior in high school, they'd be a completely different player, right?
Yes.
You've just got some kids who don't develop as quick.
Right.
And unfortunately, if you're playing high school sports, In some cases, that means you don't get to your best self from a high school age perspective until you're a senior,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And that has an effect on the program. It
Yeah,
does.
and a
Yeah.
player's
So,
future. It could
right.
we all know, and even Joe, we know guys who started. Now we as the Freveletti family we maxed out at 8th grade freshman year, from a height
And
perspective,
6 feet.
and
Plunk. Yeah.
Coach knew, Pat always would say, you came in a hairy chested Italian, and so
Right.
we were done, but there were people who you saw that were 5'3", 5'2", and ended up at 6'2", and
Yeah.
could eat soup off your head. And so, it's so you do see it. I do see the rationale behind it. There's just
Hmm.
something, if I do it so I can develop my arm strength, or I can get more specialized coaching before I get to high school, and then that propels me maybe to a varsity player as a freshman, so I can start to get noticed and get on college radar earlier.
Right.
There's just
Hmm.
something about it. It's just that I'm not even going to say it doesn't sit well with me. It's fine, but it seems like you're working it a little.
Yeah. You're manipulating the system
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I don't,
And
if the no rules are being broken, then yeah,
it's going to be manipulated.
yes,
There's always going to be people, whether it's parents or student athletes, who want to do that. I mean, it's just part of it. And in today's environment, it's even more so, because everybody knows about, what might be at the end of this,
right.
when you get through your high school career, that you've got some kind of payday, whether it's, NIL or something else,
Yeah.
right?
And Joe,
So,
what about on the back end of that too? So
right.
we're starting to see that a little more, where this whole thing. I never saw this in my days in high school. I don't know if you did, but reclassification.
Yeah, I
So you
didn't even think
graduate
you could do
earlier.
that.
Yeah, right.
I did not think you could do that.
Yeah,
I mean, I do know that you get 4 years in high school, but the high school that we went to, I don't think this would ever be an option to reclassify and say, I know I'm going to graduate as a senior in 2028, but I've got enough credits where I can reclassify to 2027 and graduate, because I want to get to that college experience and those NIL dollars and whatever else comes with it a year sooner. And we're seeing more and more of that now.
yeah. What you started to see, probably, I'm saying at least 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, was you started to see kids who received the scholarship, from whatever school, and they would graduate early. So they would be able to graduate in January of their senior year and then go right into
Right.
college so they could participate in spring ball. And that was kind of,
That was a big
that
deal
was a big
if
deal.
somebody did
That
that.
was a big
Yes.
deal, and I know
Yeah.
at Northwestern, Fitz used to say, he used to try and talk guys out of that, say, "Hey, a lot of fun to be had between January and June of your
Right.
of your senior year in high school."
Yeah.
And, so I don't know if they still kind of, can go back and go to prom and do some of those things. They probably can. I don't see why they
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to, but that was edgy back in the day,
It was.
and I first heard about reclassification being a White Sox fan. They drafted a player from Downers Grove North 3 years ago named George
Hmm.
Wolko, and he's a massive dude, 6'7", just a total stud. And I think he was 17 when he was drafted, because he reclassified, and instead of going to his senior year, he reported to the White Sox farm system. And,
Yeah.
that was the first I'd heard of it. I bet it's a lot more common in some of the other sports, Joe. I don't know how common that would be in football, but I bet you're going to start to see. You've probably found one. Have you found one locally?
I found several locally. I won't mention any names, but who said, I've reclassified myself as a 2027 and, versus a 2028. And, you know, all I can think about is the only reason to do that is to get to your NIL money quicker.
Right.
Can you think of any other reason to do it? I can't.
No, not really. I mean, so let's put those 2 topics together. So I can repeat 8th grade, get better, I'm gonna breeze through school, right? It's gonna be no problem
Right.
doing the same stuff, and then, but
You
I've,
flunked again. You've got to repeat 8th grade one more time.
yes, gosh, a
You're going to be
constitution
you're going to
test.
be 6'4", 260 pounds by the time you get out of
Right,
grade
right.
school.
Bench pressing 350 pounds. And but I mean, so if you could think about this, so you repeat 8th grade with the whole intention of, well, then I'll reclassify and I'll be done in high school at essentially the same time I would have been, but I get to
Right.
those. So I guess the total time isn't, I'm still getting there as at the same time and not missing those dollars and those opportunities as I would have had I just gone to high
Right.
school.
You position yourself in a way where when you do enter high school, you're physically a little bit further along than your other, freshman counterparts. Maybe you're stronger, you're bigger, you're faster,
Yeah, you've worked
you've
at it, you're
honed your
more
talent.
skilled. Yeah.
Yes. And now, all right, well, I've got enough credits where I can get out of here now and reclassify myself as a junior. And I mean, as a senior a year early, and then I'm still on track, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is something.
It just
The
feels like you're
more,
missing a lot too. Like you'd like to go,
yeah,
you'd like to, I mean, there was just, like I said, there's just a lot of fun and memories to be made that last 6 months of high school. And high school is so unique. You've got plenty of time. I don't know, again, showing my age. You got plenty of time to
it is.
make it a job. And, because that's what it becomes. And it's no longer, it never, ever, ever feels like it does in high school again.
No, I mean, high school are some of your best years,
Yeah.
right? And, we are sounding older, but that's fine. But one of the things that bothers me about some of these recent trends that we're talking about is high school, especially it's more so for the elite athletes, Dan, not necessarily, down to, some of the other athletes within high school, but it's becoming very transactional, right?
Hmm.
And everybody is figuring out ways to not skirt the system, but work the system in a way that benefits them from a transactional standpoint versus the high school experience, which everybody knows is really good and special and something that you should want to be a part of for all 4 years, right?
Yeah, and I know there's
Yeah,
people
I
who
think.
don't have that same nostalgia toward high school for whatever reason. So we were lucky enough to have great experiences. However, I still think that there's growth, to be had and memories to be made, and because when you're our age, what do you got? Those memories are what you're talking about, not you
Right.
know. So anyway, it's
Yeah. And
it's definitely different.
it is different. And that's just one of the areas within the arms race, Dan. I mean, one of the things you and I have talked about and we've noticed over the past, couple of years since we've been doing this podcast and is kind of the program arms race where different schools within the Chicago Catholic League are building new stadiums, right? They're building field houses, athletic performance centers, strength and conditioning centers. They've got former NFL players now on their staff. We got club coaches joining high school staffs. So, I feel like, from a standpoint of some of the facilities, is that, you know, some of the schools have looked around and said, you know what, we are really far behind here. We have got to get, our facilities up to par because, there's something to be said for attracting the best students and the best athletes, right?
Yeah.
They want to go somewhere that has good facilities. You can't rely anymore on, look at this place was built in 1917 and it's got a lot of history, right? Sorry about the go patch in the back that you've got to practice on,
Yeah. Yeah.
but look at these buildings. They're nice and old.
Right.
That just doesn't cut it anymore,
No,
right?
no, you've gotta
No.
have it's funny that history sold a lot of people, right? And that's kind of
Mhm.
what you needed, and you leaned into that, and I'm sure some places still do that, but with a tweak. We've also got this awesome weight room, we've got these great facilities, we're building a new field. If you don't have a nice facility to play your games at, you are at a competitive disadvantage.
For sure.
There is
Yeah.
no more we tough it out on the backfield and we don't care the grass is 8 inches high and we're gonna wear longer spikes and we're gonna do you are now competing for, especially in the Catholic League, for high level athletes that are looking at what the conditions are they're gonna practice and play in and how that is, viewed by them, their friends, their families, and it's become a big deal. It's now a must have. And Joe, it's a trickle down. College was doing this 10 years or 15 years ago. That arms race was
Mhm.
all facilities based, bigger stadiums, cooler practice facilities, all indoor practice facilities. Now we have an indoor facility, they have an indoor facility. You don't have an
Right.
indoor facility? And so we're seeing the same thing. Don't be surprised if there are places with indoor facilities already, so don't be surprised if
Yes.
you start to see some sort of expansion there as well, where you could potentially host junior high, players and have that ability to have them on campus that way. So yeah,
Mhm.
we're probably just at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, and I was in preparing for this episode, I was looking at some of the schools within the Chicago Catholic League and what their capital programs are right now and what they're doing. And really not just now, but you look, within the past couple of years. So it's not like they're not aware of this, but you've got Bennett with, building a new stadium. Right, a new football stadium coming back on campus. They've been
Right.
playing over at Benedictine,
Yeah.
right? You got Joliet Catholic, who we know where they played,
Yeah.
and
Memorial
you know,
Stadium. Yeah.
Memorial Stadium in Joliet, and they just bought a big piece of property, I think the old prison out there, and they're big new athletic complex with football field, other fields, all of that. You've got St. Viator, who's got a program. They're bringing their football team and other sports back on campus. They've been playing their football games at Roosevelt,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
Roosevelt University, which is out there fairly close. You got St. Lawrence with a 37,000 square foot athletic field house that they are building. Got Maris. Last year, they opened up a brand new track and field facility. Beautiful facility and all astroturfed, and they use it for other things as well, like practice. Got DePaul Prep, who's building a 73,000 square foot athletic complex. Right. Just unreal. We were out at DePaul Prep, and remember, I think Coach Passarella, who was the head coach at the time, he pointed out where they were going to be building their new complex. We were out at Marmion Academy too. And 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, they opened up a huge 70,000 square foot athletic complex there,
Yeah. That was
a
nice.
field house.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. So, the arms race has started. It started a couple years ago and it's continuing. And to me, it feels like it doesn't have to be the arms race doesn't have to be require anyone to kind of dominate that. I feel like it's more it requires everyone to kind of think or believe that they can't fall behind. Right. That's the
Exactly.
feeling I'm getting right now is
Yep.
all these schools are like, we can't fall behind. Look at what they did. They did this 2 years ago. They did this a year ago. They opened this up a year ago. These people or this school, they just announced they're building a 70,000 square foot facility. You know, uh,
Yeah. We need to make
we
it
can't fall behind.
75,000. Yes.
Right.
Right.
We just got to keep up. They
Yeah.
just got to keep up. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and I've always seen it, taking the kids to look at colleges and that they're constantly building. And I feel like college campuses are like Las Vegas. It's like it gets rebuilt every
hmm
5 years. If you go in 5 years, it'll look nothing like it did when you went there. Northwestern, when I was there, it looks totally different now, totally different.
yeah.
And, you know, you talked about, we started this by talking about back in the day. And, if you had an official, standardized, formalized weight program, it used to be like, wow, they got their stuff together. That is a,
Right.
that is a big
They are
deal.
lifting weights on a schedule. Look
Yes.
at that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can remember we used to tear pages out of the Joe Weider magazine and tape them up on the wall and follow those workouts. And so it was, and by the time I left, we had a formalized program. But if someone got their hands on like a college workout, occasionally someone might get their hands on it, it was like you treated it like the holy grail,
Right.
and you followed it to the letter. And now there's consultants, there's nutrition consultants, there's everything that they have in college and the NFL and professional sports, it's trickling its way down.
Yeah, it is. Like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, schools competed we competed for conference championships, right? And, today, I think in a lot of ways, the schools are competing for perception, right? Whether it's facilities, social media, coaching staffs, college commitments, transfer announcements, stadium projects, it's all about perception. And it's no longer just, there's the season and then you're done. It is 365 days a year now that there's, something going on. It's a year-long program that's very out there and it's very wide and takes into account a lot of these different things. So it's so much different than it was before.
Yeah, and that's before you talk about travel, which I just read is club sports and travel sports now represent $40 billion a year industry.
Ay,
I mean,
yeah.
we both have contributed to that over the
Mhm.
years, whether you've got a stack of bats that you could use to build a building, and
Yes.
hotel receipts as if we were some sort of travel agent, around the Midwest. So
Yeah.
I can see how it's out there, and maybe, like I've said before, and stole it from I think it was Steve Rosenblum on The Score. Every question can be answered with the money.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and there's a ton of money right now within a lot of the, private schools, and you can see where some of the public schools who don't have that same kind of ability to raise that money and build all these facilities and that, why they've got another reason to complain about the private schools, right?
Yeah.
That
Well, I mean, I do think there are some cool public school facilities out there. I know Homewood Flossmoor has a really good facility, and some of these public schools
Mhm.
have awesome facilities, and they've had them for years where these private schools haven't had them. They did have to practice on the goat patch, out in the
Yes.
back, and yeah, it gets watered when it rains, type of thing. And if you're practicing out there, and if you happen to practice after or during rain, the field will never look like this again, never look nice again. So you'll be practicing in
Yeah.
mud. So there's probably the pushback would be some of the private schools saying, "Hey, we've done without for decades." So we finally have found a way or wised up and said, we've got to try and have campaigns that they would say probably just help us keep up with
Yeah.
with the Joneses.
Yeah, another aspect of this, Dan, too, is this is one of the more interesting trends to me is the hiring of former NFL players within the Chicago Catholic League, right? Whether it's a head coach, whether it's putting them on your staff, in another role. But I feel like that's another aspect of this arms race, right? That one school hires an NFL coach, and we know there's a variety of them in the Chicago Catholic League, but it's not ending, right? They keep every year. You just mentioned Darius Fleming, right? Who's former NFL linebacker. He's now at St. Lawrence. I think he was at St. Rita before that, and I just feel like every school thinks or feels like they need to have an former NFL player on their staff.
Yeah, you can bet if they've got one that's at their disposal, they're gonna try like hell to bring them on board,
Yeah.
because it's a draw. All this stuff, Joe, is about how do we attract better players, and
Hmm.
is there a way that we can get an advantage or again not fall behind, because we
Yeah.
don't, and is it valuable or not? I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever get a player coming out that says, I went to XYZ high school because so and so was there and he was in the NFL.
Right.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you'll
I'm
ever
not
get
sure
one.
about that yet
Yeah.
either. Yeah. And I think maybe we'll see that as we go further because it's really, well, in not all cases is it a recent trend, but
Yeah, and it doesn't have
we'll,
to be. I hate to position it as bad because I don't think it's bad. But we've talked about it before. You're going to get awesome instruction, and it's
yeah,
amazing that these players, who have this incredible skill and knowledge, can give back and can teach them. And so there's nothing about them as players and coaches that is inherently bad or wrong that they were to get a job. It's but if it becomes, well, we aren't hiring anybody, unless they have some sort of name attached to them or some sort of cachet that might attract a few students, then it's just part of an arms race.
yeah. As I sit here and I think about our discussion, Dan, and listen to it, we started out this episode talking about the professionalization of high school sports. And is that a thing? And as I listen to us kind of go through this, we've been talking for a half an hour here now. I think, this sounds like maybe 10 years ago what you would have been talking about at the college level, right? As far as, players, as far as building new facilities, attracting, the most talented players, getting the best coaches in your building, you know, getting people with cachet so you can promote yourself even more. Doesn't it seem that way? It really
Yes. Oh
does.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything that we're talking about, you can point to college 10 to 15 years ago. It's probably moved faster than that even, but it's really progressing. I mean, and
Yeah.
and social media has a way of doing that, of kind of being the gas that you put on the little flame to make it just blow up.
Yeah. Well, the other aspect to this too, Dan, and we've alluded to this, is really from a standpoint of the different schools within the Chicago Catholic League, there's really a talent arms race going on as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every week, you see another player that's transferring, from one particular school into this school. And, in most cases, it's somebody going from either another private school to, a different private school or a public school back to a private school, all looking for that opportunity. So I feel like there's an arms race going on there too to attract as much talent as you can. And maybe it's the case where there's this committee in place at the IHSA for competitive balance. And what's come out in our interview with Kevin Schmidt, you know, he said they're, most likely looking at transfers,
Right.
right? And transfer rules.
Yeah.
So I feel like a little bit that some of the schools are trying to get as many kids now, because they know things are going to be limited going forward. Do you get that feeling
That
too?
that would be unreal if there's that level of planning happening.
Yeah.
It's almost like signing free agents before a change in collective bargaining. Doesn't it sound like that?
Yes,
I mean,
right.
it
It
really
does.
it really does.
But
And
why would that not be a thing? Everything else is a thing,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about it a bunch of times. I feel like this is probably a thing too, and everybody knows it. The student athletes know it. Their parents know it. They know something's coming down where things may be more restrictive, and it's not that big of a leap to think that this is happening this year before things get too restrictive
Yeah.
for for some of these kids,
Yep. No,
right?
it makes perfect sense. I'm sure if I think that no way, no one's thinking about that. They're thinking about, what drills they're gonna run in 9-on-7,
Right.
and what plays they're gonna call and that sort of thing. That's a short-sighted view. And if you are doing that, if you are a short-sighted view person, then you are in the wake of what's
Yes.
going on. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
you are.
these schools have the long view in mind,
They do, and I think some of them are better at it than others.
for sure.
Yeah, and, none of them, if they wanna compete within, the Chicago Catholic League, can afford not to invest in whatever way that I mean, all these couple of different ways or several different ways that you and I have talked about, in this episode. It's an investment, right? It's an investment of time, it's an investment of money, it's an investment of,
Financial.
p
Oh, yeah, you said money.
financial
Yeah, financial
investment, yeah,
and
but
planning and, time and treasure, for sure.
yeah. Yeah, because it applies to everything. It applies to facilities, coaching hires, transfer activity, social media presence, which we've talked about, the reclassification things that we talked about. I mean, you can't afford not to either be aware of this as a program or investing in it in whatever way you're going to invest in it.
Right. Yeah, there's gotta
Yeah.
be a commitment, and it's funny, that word is what was used at colleges forever and ever. What kind of commitment do they have to the football program? And, now you're getting that question asked from incoming, freshmen. And what kind of
Hmm.
commitment is there to whatever sports program, which is
Right.
just amazing. It's a whole new world, and it does not it's changed drastically, Joe, since we've started this podcast. We're going into
It
year 3.
has. Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, we've talked about some of these things, and some, you're always going to miss some things. We thought, well, there's the train is on the track, right? With transfers and NIL and some of that. So some of that we hit on, but some of this other stuff is stuff that we missed, and it's just rolling.
It is. It's just rolling. The genie is out of the bottle and you are not going to put it back in. I don't care, you know, what your thoughts are. If you're somebody like you or me who, would like to see something a little bit more, like when we were in high school and that, yeah, I think you just got to let that go.
You
I'm
do.
sorry,
Every
people. After,
generation looks back
yeah.
with nostalgia and say, "Oh, back in the
Hmm.
day, things were different and better."
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. All right. So before we close out tonight's show, we'd like to pause for a moment and recognize someone who has been part of this podcast almost since day one. Zuko wasn't just the dog of the week, he was part of our family and in many ways part of the Varsity Voices family as well. Dan wanted to share a few words about our favorite dog.
Yeah, Joe, thanks. And thanks for a post you put out recently. This might be tough for me. As we wrap up, I just wanted to take a moment, and you mentioned a member of our family. He was part of my family and our podcast family that we recently lost. Zuko was our Rhodesian Ridgeback, and for years he was my shadow. He became a fixture on the podcast and was welcome as by far the most popular member of our group when we
Yes,
would when we
that's
would visit
true.
schools.
Yes.
Joe, when I would be in this chair, people wouldn't see it. When I would be in this chair doing this podcast, he was literally right behind me. He blocked me from moving. If he didn't get in by the time I started, he waited at the door for me to be done. If I was watching games here on Friday nights, he was at my feet. If I got up to go somewhere, he was right behind me. He didn't care who won or lost or who we were going to name the dog of the week. But he loved getting out. He loved being with the players and the coaches, and he loved hanging out with you and me.
Yep.
We miss the big guy terribly, but we're grateful for every day that we had with him. I miss him. I miss him like I can't believe was even possible. But I just wanted to say, Zuko, this one's for you.
Well said, Dan. We will miss Zuko very much. Okay, so as we've discussed tonight, whether we're talking about reclassifying students, repeating eighth grade, building multi-million dollar facilities, hiring high profile coaches, or attracting transfers, All of these developments point to one reality: high school sports are changing. The competitive landscape today looks very different than it did 10 years ago, and it may look even more different 5 years from now. The challenge for schools, administrators, coaches, parents, and governing bodies like the IHSA will be finding the balance between opportunity and competitive fairness. How do you encourage growth and innovation without creating an environment where only the programs with the most resources can thrive? And perhaps the biggest question of all, where does it stop? Will facility upgrades lead to more facility upgrades? Will coaching hires lead to even bigger coaching hires? Will transfer activity continue to accelerate? And what impact, if any, will future competitive balance recommendations have on the direction we're headed? Those are questions we don't have all the answers to tonight, but they're conversations worth having, and we'll continue following them right here on the Varsity Voices. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, follow, and share it with fellow coaches, parents, players, and fans of high school sports. For our favorite dog, Zuko, my brother Dan, I'm Joe, and thanks for listening to the Varsity Voices High School Sports Talk. We'll see you next time.